Dear students, welcome to a new lecture in microeconomics. And in this lecture, you will be studying how J.R. Hicks, a British economist, separated income effect and substitution effect from price effect. This can be explained with the help of a diagram. In this diagram, we have two axes, y and x, and on x axis we measure good x, and on y axis we measure good y. And the consumer has some income, so his income is limited. So imagine that the consumer spent all his income only to purchase two good y and good x. Since his income is limited, he cannot buy unlimited quantity of good y and good x. So imagine if the consumer spent all his income only to purchase good y, then he can buy only up to OA unit of good y. Then he won't be able to buy any unit of good x. Similarly, if the consumer wants to spend all his income on good x, then he will be able to buy only up to OB unit of good x. Then no unit of y can be purchased. If the consumer wants to purchase both good y and good x, then he can buy any point that falls within this budget line or on this budget line, A, B. So that's what budget line shows. This is the indifference curve, IC1, that simply shows various combinations of two goods, good X and good Y. Whatever point you be on the indifference curve, that point shows two combinations of good Y and good X. But whatever point you may be, you are getting, the consumer is getting the same level of satisfaction. So the consumer is in equilibrium where the indifference curve is tangent to the price line AB. So at point E, the indifference curve IC1 is tangent to the budget line AB. So at that point, the consumer is buying ON unit of Y and OM unit of good X. And imagine that there is no change in the income of the consumer, there is no change in the price of good Y, but the price of good X decreases. If the price of good X decreases, the consumer can surely buy more unit of good X if he spent all his income to purchase good X. So the new budget line is AB1. There is no change in point A because there is no change in the price of good Y. You can buy only up to OA unit of good Y, because there is no change in the price of good Y. But since the prices of good X fell, now the consumer can buy more unit of good X. So the new budget line is AB1. So on the right side, you know that there are many indifference curves. So the consumer is in equilibrium at point E2, where the IC2 indifference curve is tangent at point E2, where the IC2 is tangent to the new budget line AB1. Now you could see that the consumer is purchasing more unit of good X. Instead of OM, he is buying more unit of good X. He is buying OM 2 unit of good X. So I have to use a highlighter here. So before he was buying only up to OM unit of good X, Now the consumer buys OM2 unit of good X. So the movement from OM to OM2 is known as price effect. Why this is known as price effect? Because the prices of X has fallen. So the consumer is now buying more unit of good X. Okay, but the purpose of this class is to see how J.R. Hicks separated this price effect into income effect and substitution effect. For this purpose, we have to take away the increase in income or the real income of the consumer. Since the prices of X fell, now his real income has increased, right? That's why the consumer is able to buy more unit of good X. So if we take that income away, then the consumer is left with the previous income, right? And so the income is taken away in such a way that the consumer has the old level of satisfaction. Now look at here. We have a new budget line called CD. So this is known as compensating variation. So when this increased income of the consumer is taken away, so that the consumer is at the same level of satisfaction, right? The same level of satisfaction that he was enjoying before. So the new equilibrium point is E1, where the consumer is buying OM unit of good X and ON1 unit of good Y. Since the increase in income is taken away by using a compensating variation, the consumer is at the same level of satisfaction he was before, because he is in the same indifference curve IC1. But look at here, instead of buying OM unit, now the consumer is buying OM1 unit of X. So there is a movement from E to E1. There is a movement from M to M1. So this is known as substitution effect. Even though the increased income of the consumer is taken away through a compensating variation and the consumer is now in a new budget line, still the consumer is purchasing more unit of good X. So this is known as the substitution effect. Substitution means the consumer is substituting or the consumer is buying more unit of X than Y. So the consumer is substituting X for Y. So this is known as substitution effect. And if that income, if the income that taken away is given back to the consumer, then the consumer is in equilibrium at point E2, right? E2, and there is a movement from equilibrium point E1 to E2. So that is known as income effect, because the income is given back to the consumer. So the consumer is in new equilibrium at point E2. So there is a movement from M1 to M2. So this movement is known as income effect. Income effect. Okay, it's a bit difficult. difficult to write with this. Okay, income effect. This is known as income effect. And movement from M to M1, this point, right? This point is known as substitution effect. So this price effect, that is movement from OM to OM2, this from OM to OM2 is split into income effect and substitution effect. But one thing you have to notice here is that the consumer is in the old indifference curve when the compensating variation is applied. Now you are in a position to identify how J.R. Hicks split the price effect into income effect and substitution effect. Thank you very much.